Welcome to Board Gems, a video series in which I introduce older board game gems and card games and, anything related. This game that I'm going to cover in this video originally came out in 1985. It's a German card game called Kuhhandel, which literally means cow trade. And it has an equivalent idiom in English. I would imagine that's close to a horse trade in English, like a particularly complex or clever trade. It's for 3 to 5 players, ages 10 and up, and the box says it takes 45 minutes to play. Age and player count, all accurate. It is a little bit longer than the box states, in my experience anyway. It's a trading game, it's an auction game. Expect it to take a little bit more time. There was, in 2009, kind of a re-release of this called Kuhhandel Master, which ups the player count to 6, adds some extra variants as well. I'm not sure this ever had an English release. This one did. The English name is You're Bluffing, which is kind of a rather plain Jane name as far as I'm concerned. Kuhhandel, cow trade, horse trade, it fits the theme and setting. The idea is that you start off with a certain amount of money, and every round, generally speaking, animals are going to be put up for auction. You bid on these animals, and ideally you make a show of the auctioneer part of it, because it's a just jump in. It's not like just taking turns around the table. Just jump in with your bid. But what you're trying to do is get sets of the same 4 animal. But the game doesn't end until all the animals are coalesced. That's the wrong word. In a complete set. So if 2 players have the same animal, there has to be some sort of trade between them. And this is not a negotiation game. That works via kind of a silent, blind auction between the 2 players. I'll show you how it plays. I'll show you with this version, because I think this presentation is probably the most common that I've seen. But I'll talk more at the end about whether it's a gem or not, and I'll talk a little bit about the differences in Kuhhandel Master too. The game consists of 2 decks of cards. One deck of cards has animals, and they range in value of 1,000 for the horses, and there's a 10 somewhere if I can find it. There you go, a 10 for the chicken. So there's 10 different types of animals, and there's 4 of each type. So shuffle up this deck of cards and put in the center of the table. The other deck of cards consists of money. You don't shuffle these. You can sort out all the money by denomination. Give each player 2 zeros, 4 tens, and 1 50. That's their starting money. Any remaining zeros and tens can go back in the box. You don't need them. The other higher denominations of values, 50, 100, 200, 500, just put to the side. They'll come into play later in the game. And you're ready to begin. The deck of animal cards consists of 10 different animals, and there's 4 of each animal type. At the end of the game, for every animal, 1 player is going to own all 4 cards of that animal. And that player, at the end, will score this many points. So the player who has the 4 cats will get 90. The player who gets the 4 sheep gets 250. The player who gets the 4 pigs gets 650. The difference in value is quite large. However, that sum of all your sets of animals is then multiplied by the number of sets of animals. So if you have a complete set of pigs and a complete set of sheep and a complete set of chickens, for example, your final score is going to be 650 plus 250, that's 900, plus 10, 910, times 3. So 2,730. The scores can be pretty large in this game. So even though these are worth very little in and of themselves, if you're also able to get high-valued animals, these help multiply their score. Pick a start player, play as clockwise. On your turn, you can do one of 2 things. you can draw the top card from the deck and initiate an auction for it, at which point you will have the option to buy it yourself or take the winnings of that auction. Or if you and another player have the same type of animal, you can initiate a Kuhhandel, a cow trade, a horse trade, as we might say in English. Initiate a trade such that by the end, the animals will have consolidated a little bit. And the game will end when all the animals are consolidated. All 4 horses are owned by a single player. All 4 cows are owned by a single player, and so on. And then total up the scores. In the official rules, any money you have left over at the end of the game is useless. Although there is a variant where you can add your remaining money. Most turns will consist of flipping up a single card. There is again a variant which speeds up the game, and I do recommend it, in which you flip over 2 cards, and you auction 2 animals at once instead of 1 animal. But by the official rules, you would just auction 1 animal at a time. Now this is not an orderly auction. The player whose turn it is, they're the auctioneer, and they help the auction along. It helps if they get into the role of auctioneer. And then players can just jump in with their bids. Right? Somebody might say, I bid 30. Okay, 30, we got 30. Do we have 40? 40 anywhere, right? Like that. And anybody can jump in at any time. Going once, going twice, sold. And ideally you would have a gavel. The board game version does come with a gavel. I usually just hit my fist on the ground. Going once, going twice, sold. So as soon as this comes down, no more bids. Now, sold, but the auctioneer at this point has a choice to make. Let's suppose the bid for this was 100. The auctioneer has a choice. They can either pay off that higher bidder, pay that amount to the person who bid that amount, and take the animal for themselves, or they can take the winnings. So in this case, take the 100. And then the player who pays the 100 would then, in that case, get the animal and just put it face up in front of them. That's almost the only way of getting money in this game, is auctioning off animals and then taking the proceeds of the auction. There is, however, one special animal in the deck, and that's the donkey. You'll see the donkey is carrying a bucket of gold coins in its mouth. Just like every other animal, there are 4 donkeys. Every time a donkey is revealed as part of the auction, everybody gets 1 card of the next highest valued money card. So when the first donkey is revealed, everybody takes an extra 50 and puts it in their money pile, their money hand. When the second donkey is revealed, each player will take 100, and 200 for the third, and 500 for the fourth donkey. But otherwise, the donkeys work exactly the same way. They're just a timer that brings in more money into the game. That's the only money that's coming into the game. Otherwise, the money is just moving back and forth between the players. Instead of initiating an auction, you can instead initiate a trade. You pick one other player around the table that shares the same animal as you. So in this case, you might have a pig and I may have a pig. If I initiate a trade on my turn, by the end, one of us will have both pigs. If I had 2 pigs and you had 2 pigs, then by the end of this trade, one of us will have 4 pigs. And then at that point, once one player has all 4 pigs, that player keeps the pigs until the end of the game. You cannot initiate a trade unless you have one to put up yourself. In the case of a difference of number, so if you have 2 and I have 1, after this trade, either you get my 1 or I take 1 from you. So only 1 is available to trade. But if we both have 2, then 2 are up for trade. The way the trade works is the player who initiates the trade takes a certain number of cards from their hand and puts it face down in front of them. You can count how many cards, but you can't see the values. This is my offer for your animals. Always one type of animal. You then have a choice to make. You can either accept my bid and just give me your animals, keeping in mind that There are also 0 cards, so you can bluff in this case. Or you can make a counteroffer. Without looking at these cards, you would put down a number of cards yourself, face down. After that, we take each other's offers. And we keep that money. Of those offers, the player who offered the highest amount will also get the other player's animals. So play continues like this. On your turn, as long as there are animals still available to be auctioned, you may auction them, or initiate a trade with another player who shares the same animals. Once this deck runs out, it's only possible to initiate trades. And if one player has complete sets of 4 and nothing else, then they basically sit out for the rest of the game because they can't initiate any trades. Nobody has anything to trade with them. They can calculate their score. And the player with the highest value of cards, of sets, wins. A complete set of animals is worth the face value. A complete set of pigs is worth 650. Sum up all the values of all your complete sets, and then multiply that value by the number of sets. And the highest value wins. Money is, according to the official rules, useless by the end of the game. But there is a variant that allows you to add whatever remaining money you have to your final score. That's it. You're ready to play your Bluffing, Kuhhandel. Now we'll talk about the differences in Kuhhandel Master. Regular Kuhhandel is a subset of Kuhhandel Master, so if you have this version, you can play the old way or with the new additions. For one thing, players start with a little bit of extra money. I think instead of one of the 10s, they start with a 20, so just a little bit extra money. But otherwise, they divide the money the same way, and it can play up to 6 this version, I believe. There's enough money cards for 6 players. The animal deck has the same animal cards, ranging from the chicken at 10 to the horse to 1,000. However, there are also rats, and there are what are called pedigree animals that have a 250 in a medal there. There's just one of each type of animal that's a pedigree. There's no rat pedigree, but there are 4 rats, just like any of the other animals. Gameplay works the same way. On a player's turn, they can flip over the top card and auction it off, or they can initiate a trade with another player who has the same animal type. How does this change? If the animal is a rat, the auction is a little bit different. Rats are bad, you don't want rats. At the end of the game, rats, just like any other animal, will have the complete set owned by a single player. One player will have all 4 rats. That player has to cancel out one of their other animal sets, their lowest valued one, before calculating the score. So the rats and that animal just go back in the box. Player doesn't score them, so you don't want rats. The way a rat auction works is players offer money to not take the rat. And this is going to be familiar with fans of, for example, No Thanks. Starting to the left of the auctioneer, players may either add 1 money card of indeterminate value, keep the value down, could be a 0, and place it on the rat. Then their turn is over. And then it's the next player's turn. They can add a money card of any value on top of the rat. And then it goes to the next player. By placing a money card, you are avoiding taking the rat. At some point, someone will decide to take the rat. And when they do, they take all the money cards that were on top of the rat. The auctioneer also takes part in this auction. It keeps going around until one player says, well, that's a lot of money, I'm going to take the rat. When initiating a trade involving rats, it works the same way. A player will make an offer, that player may either accept it or make a counter offer. And if they make a counter offer, they exchange money. But whereas with a normal animal, the player with the highest bid takes the animal from the other player. Instead, the player with the higher bid gets to give the rat to the other player. So you're bidding to not take the animal. The last thing are the pedigrees. If a pedigree card is revealed, then we do a Dutch auction. A Dutch auction is where we count down, and then one single player jumps in to offer that amount. In this case, you're not offering an amount of money, you're offering a number of money cards. The auctioneer starts at 10, and any player, if they want to spend 10 money cards of any value, they can jump in, take the card, and then they put 10 money cards into the middle. If nobody offers 10 after a few seconds, then the auctioneer drops down to 9, and then 8, until somebody slaps the card. And when they slap the card, they take money cards from their hand. Let's say it was 5, and then they put the 5 cards down like that. And just like with a regular animal, the auctioneer has a choice. They can match the bid and take the pedigree animal for themselves, or they can take this, and then the player who offered this gets the pedigree. But the auctioneer can't look at these values. They just see the number, 5 cards. If the auctioneer wants to give 5 money cards of any value, they can match that bid. Instead, the winner of the auction will take their money back. The auctioneer will give 5 money cards of any value the auctioneer wants, and then they take the pedigree card. How much the pedigree is worth depends on whether the player also has the complete set of that animal. If the player has the pedigree dog, but they don't have the dog set by the end of the game, then it's worth a straight 250. But if they have the complete set, then the value total is 160 plus 250. And this value happens before multiplication. Because you remember, if you have multiple sets, you would total up all the values of the sets and then multiply by the number of sets. Without the pedigree, this dog is worth 160 times 4, because there are 4 sets. But if you also have the pedigree, it's 160 plus 250, 410, and then multiplied by 4. So getting the pedigree and the set is huge. If you didn't have the set, then just after you do the normal sum of your sets, you just add the 250 on the end. I think that's it. Now you're ready to play Kuhhandel Master. In order to like Kuhhandel, you have to love auctions, because this game is all about auctions. It's basically the only mechanism in the game is auctions, and even Kuhhandel Master throws in a few extra types, I think 2 extra types of auctions basically in Kuhhandel Master. So if you like auctions, that's kind of a prerequisite to liking Kuhhandel. And it's a particular auctioneer type auction, right? It's not a polite, my turn comes around, should I up the bid, should I pass? No, there's no waiting around, people have to jump in. The idea of escalating money. So we all start with the same amount of money, and for the most part, the money just changes hands. There's only particular periods during the game in which new money comes into play. But I like that when the new money comes into play, especially because those amounts are escalating. By the time the 4th donkey comes out, everybody's getting an extra $500, and then after that, the bids can be really, really wild. Because keep in mind, according to the official rules, money is worthless at the end of the game. Now you could easily do it, and I think there is an official variant in which money at the end of the game still counts. And I'm not against that variant, because the game is very unforgiving. Basically, as soon as all the animals are out and in play, and then it's just a matter of horse trading between the players, there will be probably at least one player who doesn't have a reasonable chance of winning. Having money count as points at the end of the game does a lot to offset that. So it gives everybody a chance. Even if I'm not getting the good animals, at least I can, still work toward getting money. And maybe that'll make a difference. Or maybe at least instead of just losing, maybe I'll be able to up my place a little bit in the final standings. I mean, I can go either way on it, but it's not a complete recommendation because it does change the game a little bit. If you know that money is worthless, then you're going to spend it, right? You're going to have a different attitude toward those final auctions. So when your turn comes around, you have a choice. You can initiate a horse trade, or you can auction off an animal. But initiating a horse trade is declining an opportunity to get money. And in the first 2/3 of the game, getting money is critical. My experience is that for the first, like I said, 2/3 of the game, or basically the first part of the game until all the animals are spoken for, it's mostly just auctions. It's the horse trading really only comes into play near the end when players are trying to consolidate their sets. But of course, at that point of the game, some players are just not going to be involved. And that's a downside because the scores really tip things toward the higher valued animals, which makes sense. The lower valued animals are still worthwhile because they increase the multiplier of your score, but that doesn't help you much unless you also have some high valued animals. So that's a downside. You're going to have players who by the end of the game are just they don't really have a chance. That's why the money for points variant helps that a little bit. Generally, I would only really consider that variant for new players. Just makes that first experience just a little bit smoother, a little less jarring if you're out of the running. But when your turn comes around and you initiate the auction, and then a player, wins the auction, basically, you as the auctioneer have a choice. You can take the money, or you can pay that player the money to get the animal yourself. For one thing, it discourages low bids. So, what'll happen is, the auctioneer will put up a low-valued animal, maybe a goose or something, right? And somebody goes, I'll bid 10. And the auctioneer goes, going once, going twice, sold. And then the bidder's like, I'm in 50. Because if the bid is too low, the auctioneer will just pay it themselves. Right? So that discourages low bids. You want to start even with a relatively high bid, and that, with experienced players, helps keep the game, not too long, right? It's not a typical auction where, people feel like, well, I'll start at 1 and then see how it goes, and by the end it's up to 56. Choosing to buy that animal instead of taking the money is a huge decision because there's only so many ways of getting money in the game. So when your turn comes around, very likely you're going to want the money. But of course, the value has to be worth it, right? So that's the balancing act between the bidders who want to bid low enough that it's not too expensive for them, but high enough that the auctioneer is not going to just buy it themselves, and give the auctioneer that tough choice, right? I want that animal, but that's a fair bit of money. I would like the money. And because the only time you get money, such when the donkeys come out, is when it's your turn as the auctioneer, it can also be the case where you don't want to bid too high on animals if your turn's not going to come around for a while. Because you don't know what animals are going to turn up between now and when your turn comes up next. So you have a certain amount of money. You want that animal, a moderate amount. How much do you offer? Because if you offer too much, you're going to be short on money. And then maybe in the next player's turn, there's an animal you really want. And you won't have the money to be in the bidding. For hobbyists, I would like to mention that the game offers hidden trackable information, HTI. Information that is publicly available to everyone at some point and is trackable if you make notes or have an amazing memory. But in practice, it's hidden and the designer kind of expects you to have a feel for it instead of know exactly. And that's the case in Kuhhandel with money. Everybody starts with the same amount of money, and all the transactions up until the horse trades happen, all the transactions are out in the open. The horse trades, those transactions are silent. You're giving the money. Actually, I've seen rules both ways. I think I've seen a version of the rules in which the players reveal their secret bids to each other so all the players can see. That would literally make everything trackable. The rules that I have and the way I've always played, they see each other's bids, but the other players don't see. And because most of those horse trades happen near the end, in the first part of the game, it's more the auctions, all that information, all the money changing hands is visible. You know I started with X amount of money. You might know that I spent $60 on this thing and, $250 on this thing, that sort of thing. And you could keep track if you have an amazing memory. Of course, in practice, you don't. Some players at the table might have a better memory than you, and they will have an advantage. Players bring lots of different skill sets to the table. Some of them have a better memory than others. Some have a better auction sense, better money sense than other players. Some players may have more guile, right? Or willing to use more table talk to kind of shift the balance of power, make everybody think somebody else is winning kind of thing. Everybody brings a different skill set to the table, and that's part of what can make a game with heavy player interaction so great, because when you play it with different people, it's a different experience. And you're given a new challenge of how to overcome that. It's obviously marketed as a family game, and the artwork definitely lends itself to being very presentable to a mix of adults and kids. It presents itself as a fun, carefree game. But it is a potentially brutal game. The scores by the end can vary quite wildly. By the time all the auctions are done and you see what animals everybody has, you can basically go, okay, Sharon can't win it, Joe can't win it, it's between Kathy and me. We're the only ones that have a chance of winning. You can only initiate horse trades, cow trades, whatever, with a player who has the same animal as you. So if a player doesn't have any of a horse, there is no way they can get more horses. But near the end of the game, when you're consolidating, you need at least one horse in order to initiate a trade with somebody else who has a horse. And then one of you will have two horses, right, by the end. But if you don't have a horse going in, there's no way for you to get horses. So it really behooves you to play multiple games. That first game, if you do poorly in the auction, then by near the end, you're going to see you don't have a chance and there's no way of catching up. But that's because of poor play earlier in the game. And the next time you play, you'll know it's like, okay, going into that end game, I need to have some valuable animals, at least one cow or at least one horse or something, right? Try to spend as little money as possible getting sets of low value, and then save your money to try to get at least one set of the high value. And this is sort of thing that experience comes in from multiple plays. So as long as the game itself is fun and the players don't mind losing just to see how the game works, and then they're up for playing it again soon, it's not a problem. And honestly, most games should be like that. You can have a game that's kind of on rails, where it protects you from extreme scores, so that by the end everybody's kind of close, but also it also feels like it didn't matter what you did, right? That's the opposite extreme. That you played and you made decisions, but the decisions ended up being, oh, I got 3 points instead of 4, right? And by the end, all players are close, and somebody win, and you can golf clap or whatever, but it doesn't really matter, right? And it doesn't matter. The scores don't matter. Going into this game, winning shouldn't matter. You should try to win. Winning is the goal, but it's not the point. The point is to have fun. And if you find auctions fun, you may very well find Kuhhandel fun. Loving auctions is a prerequisite for liking Kuhhandel. So if you are on auctions, don't have too high hopes going in that this is going to be the best game for you. But if you like auctions, especially the type of auctions that you can really get into it, right? Like the auctioneer type auctions where you just call out your bids feel very interactive because you're feeding off the vibe of the table, right? If the other players tend to bid high, you're going to want to bid high too because you feel that energy at the table. The game could really use a little gavel, going once, going twice, sold, because there have been times where I've said going once, going twice, and then just as I'm saying sold, somebody puts in an extra bid, and it's like, well, I didn't finish saying the word sold. I said like so, but if you make it a gavel, right? If you add a gavel, that really will make it certain. Okay, gavel comes down, the trading's closed, the offers are closed. And there is a version of this game which does come with a gavel. It's Kuhhandel the board game, Das Brettspiel, which in English was known as Bitter Up. I don't think they made a ton in English, and I haven't played it myself. That's a square Ticket to Ride size box, and it comes with a wooden gavel. I'd be tempted to get that and then put Kuhhandel in that, stored in with the base game, with the board game. So then whenever I'm playing Kuhhandel, I just take out the whole thing, and then I have the gavel for both. But let me talk a little bit about the differences, because this is the most famous version of Kuhhandel. This is the most common one, I think, this presentation. And then we have Kuhhandel Master. So what does Kuhhandel Master do? For one thing, it increases the player count. So whereas this is 3 to 5, this is 2 to 6. I never played it with 2. I'm sure it works technically. Auction games for 2, Medici versus Strozzi is great, but the other ones, I'm not inclined to try them. I have not tried this with 2. 6, I'm fine to try. I'm always on the lookout for good 6-player games. Every group is different. Some groups, when they have 5, they want to stay together, but at 6, they're like, okay, let's split up into 2 groups of 3. And I'm actually fine with that too from a game point of view. But I just love spending time with my friends so much that whenever we're 6 or even 7, we're like, oh, let's just all stay together. Let's just have fun together. So we end up playing like party games and stuff, right? Or anything that'll play up to 6 or 7. And those are welcome because we can all stay together. Keep in mind a 6-player game would be longer. But it does a few extra things. They introduce the idea of prestige animals. And these are animals that are auctioned off in a different way. And they buff your score at the end. And that's a different auction. That's via Dutch auction. So we'll start with a high bid and then call out lower numbers until somebody commits. It does come with an extra animal type, which I could take or leave, called the rats, which work as a negative animal that you don't want. So when there's an auction for the rats, instead of the winner of the auction getting the rat, the loser of the auction will get the rat. And then at the end, when you're doing horse trades and consolidating rats, you're doing it exactly the same way. But see, in the original rules, for normal animals, the players will do offers to each other, and the higher bid will take the animal. And for rats, it's the opposite. The lower bid has to take the rat. And at the end of the game, the rats cancel out one of your animals. So I'm fine with the rats, could take it or leave it. I like the idea of it, but adding another animal type means the game takes longer, and it's already a fairly long game. And the length of the game is really the only thing I have against it. And a lot of people have said the same thing, so there are a number of variants, some official, some just come up with by fans, to try to shorten the game. The most common, and this is an official variant, is to auction 2 animals at a time. This is easily done with any number of players, and I recommend it. And it also makes the auctions a little bit more interesting, right? Okay, there's a dog and there's a goose. Well, I want the goose and you want the dog, so we're actually competing with each other. Whereas if it was just one animal, maybe not so much, right? The other one I've seen is to start every player with one animal of each of a few types. So the most common one being everybody starts with one dog and one cat and one goose and one chicken, the four least valuable ones. This is only possible if you're playing with 4 players or fewer, because there's only 4 animals of each type. I'm a little less keen on this variant. Proponents would point out, and they're absolutely right, that it allows for horse trades earlier. But do you really want to do horse trades earlier anyway? Right? You want to see what kind of auctions are coming out. You want to see the animals coming out. You want to play it by ear. That's my experience. When my turn comes around, I'm not inclined to initiate a horse trade if I don't want to, because I'm giving up an opportunity to potentially make some money. So I'm less keen on that variant. If you're playing with 3 or 4 players, you're welcome to give it a try. I don't bother with that myself. But auctioning 2 animals at a time, easily done. I recommend that. Kuhhandel is a great game that generates a lot of laughs, potentially. But it does have some prerequisites to getting the most out of it. The players at the table have to be able to get into auctions. They have to get into auctions, right? It's that auctioneer calling out bids and stuff that, not everybody's going to have the personality for that. But amongst friends, it's easily done, jump in and everything. But, if you're playing with shy people, they may have a hard time jumping in. And of course, people who are not as comfortable with auctions will have a harder time with the game. And the game is a little bit long. So, which compounds the potential problem of it having so many auctions. Because if you don't like auctions, you're not only going to like Kuhhandel, but you're going to be complaining about how long Kuhhandel is. You know what? You choose the game for the group. You want a variety of games. You might have a group of people who are more active. They're more verbal. They like to get into it. They like to feed off each other, right? They like to goad each other, right? It's like, oh, come on, you can bid more than that. I know you got more money in there, right? So for people who just look at auctions as yet another form of interaction, who enjoy each other's company and can get into the, not role-playing, you're role-playing an animal trader, okay? But getting into the setting of the auction house is a big help. And being able to feed off each other's energy. For a particular type of group, Kuhhandel is amazing. You just have to know the caveats going in. It's long, it has auctions, it has more auctions, and it has still more auctions on top of those previous auctions I mentioned. Very commonly acquired game, maybe not as much in English-speaking countries, but I bet if you were in Europe, you would have zero difficulty finding a copy of this game. And if any of that sounds fun to you, then it probably will be fun for you. But again, know your group. It's actually a little bit tough because I want to say it's for casual gamers, but auctions can potentially turn off casual gamers. So you're going to be the best judge of your game group. It's best for a group of light-hearted gamers, if that makes sense. Or gamer families, right? Families that are used to playing games, used to playing auctions, but are enjoying each other's company more than just enjoying the game mechanisms, right? Kuhhandel is a way of enjoying each other's company through the framework of game rules and the laughter that it can potentially generate. Not all games can generate laughs and fun from the game mechanisms. Some games, the players have to bring that a little bit. Kuhhandel is going to flop dead for certain groups, but for other groups, it's going to be a blast. Thanks for watching. Older games like Kuhhandel, You're Bluffing, don't stop being good because newer games come out. They're still good today, darn it. Take care.